Welcome to the UK Fishcam tour of Copenhagen Zoo. This is the longer video for the tour. The shorter version is already up and it has lots of information about price, etc. This video will contain a lot more information about the animals and their exhibits. This zoo is one of the oldest in Europe and therefore the world, and was founded in 1859. As you've seen in the background of this video as I've been talking, they had 3 polar bears. These guys are the largest living land carnivore and can grow up to 10 feet long. They can also weigh up to 860 kilos, so that's why when they stood on top of the tunnel, I was a bit worried that their feet might actually go through, especially when they were fighting. Whilst their old exhibit was very small and didn't even have room for 1 polar bear, the 3 polar bears had lots of space to run and swim in. Since they were such messy eaters, there were so many birds in the enclosure constantly taking the scraps or even whole fish. As much as I did think they were really pretty, I really wouldn't want to see a polar bear in the wild. Not only because it'd be absolutely freezing in the places that they live, but because they're one of the few species that actually see humans as food. To accentuate how scary they'd be in the wild, we saw them fighting here and you could see that they've got massive jaws and massive claws. Since these guys can run up to 35 kilometers an hour, I definitely wouldn't beat one in a race. There's actually a really interesting video by the BBC where a cameraman's inside a glass ball and the polar bear tries to get inside and eat him. Did you know that polar bears actually have jet black skin? This allows them to keep warmer by absorbing more UV rays from the sun. A very underrated animal is that of the seal. You don't normally see these guys in zoos, but I think you should do because they're so cute and I prefer them to their sea lion cousins. They're not as good on land, so they won't be able to do as many of the tricks as you'll see later in this video, but they are still so cute and can be trained to do tricks. Seals are sometimes referred to as sea dogs because they're so interactive with divers when they go in the water with them. These penguins reminded me of the Madagascar penguins when they do the smile and wave. Now here's the tricks I was talking to before when I mentioned the sea lions. These tricks aren't just for show, as much as they are entertaining, they're for the benefit of the animal themselves. Most of these tricks revolve around inspecting the animal, such as holding its paw. This allows the zookeepers and vets to get up close and check that there's no problems with the animal. Did you just see that grizzly bear jump? This bear weighs probably around 300 kilos, so that's quite a feat. These are technically just brown bears because they're not from the coastal regions of America. This is the only time I've ever seen a panda that's not been asleep. Their sleeping quarters were quite odd as it resembled somewhat of a prison. Not in a bad way, it just seemed to have all the same facilities you'd expect to see in a human prison, as they had a bed, a picnic table and a sink. And it wouldn't be pandas without them falling asleep shortly after eating. Next up was the monkey house, and it started off with some Hamadryas baboons. The babies were super active, playing around and falling about all over the floor. However, the real star of the show was the golden lion tamarin. This species was once critically endangered, with only about 200 being left in the wild. Thankfully, because of lots of donations and the help of reserves, they've actually got back to 3,200, which means that they're no longer critically endangered and just endangered. Look how cute this next clip is. This baby chimpanzee wanted to move his blanket from one nest to the other so it could be closer to its mum. It quickly realises it's going to have to hold the blanket in its mouth to free up its 2 hands so it can move faster. Next up was the Australian walkthrough exhibit. There were loads of kangaroos in this section that were really close to you. There was also supposed to be a wombat in this section, but because they're nocturnal I didn't see it. A lot of the kangaroos actually had joeys in their pouches. One of the adults was getting too excited by the presence of a baby, so the mum had to kick him in the face to get him away from it. Next up is the Tasmanian devil. These are an animal I probably never expected to see. They're only found on the island of Tasmania, where they're the #1 scavenger, being able to eat fur and bones. But that doesn't mean that they don't like to snuggle up to one another. Whilst the Tasmanian devils got to eat the head of the cow, the rest of the cow went to the lions. Here you can see the mother and her cubs eating the rest of the cow. It's because he's got to eat first and got his favourite bits. Talking of lions feeding, did you know that in the past Copenhagen Zoo actually had to kill one of its giraffes, which then went on to be food for its lions? Whilst rhinos are normally my favourites, they had nothing on this baby elephant. It was so cute and you could tell it was trying to play with everything. The rest of the family were telling it off for messing with stuff like tyres and sand because it kept eating sand, which I'm sure can't taste very good. They had lots of toys they were actually supposed to be playing with, like this barrel full of hay and a tyre on the floor. The male elephant didn't actually live with these females because it would probably kill the baby elephant, which is why in the wild females will often live in their own group and males will be solitary. Did you know that an elephant's trunk is entirely made out of muscles? Much like a big tongue, there's actually no bones in it. So when elephants are very young, they've got to learn how to control their trunk, which is very funny to watch on YouTube. They sort of just flail it around. They had some very sleepy tigers too. Unfortunately though, the hippos were kept outside on this day. The reason this isn't great is because the indoor has been revamped. In this new house they have a glass panel which lets you see the hippos underwater, and I really wish I could have shown you guys what they look like when they're underwater. This is because hippos don't actually swim. Hippos have evolved to be so dense that they actually walk on the bottom of the water, which sort of just looks like they're hopping around, and it's really cool to see. I've just talked over the caracal exhibit, which is the cat that's from the Big Flopper meme. Talking of cats, they also had meerkats and the Amur leopard. The Amur leopard is probably the most endangered species on Earth, with only about 19 to 26 living in the wild. It lives in the Amur region, which is the area between China and Russia. Like almost every zoo, they also had capybaras, which are the world's largest rodent. And they also had its smaller cousin, the prairie dog. Talking of small animals, this crocodile here is the West African crocodile, and they only grow up to 1.8 meters long. Whilst not as small as the dwarf crocodile, which only gets to 1.2 meters long, I'm pretty sure this species is the second smallest true crocodile. The snake you just saw, however, is the green anaconda, and it's the heaviest snake in the world. These guys can get up to 10 meters long, but aren't actually the longest. Instead, this title belongs to the very common reticulated python that you'll see at most zoos. Anyways, this is the end of our tour. I hope you enjoyed this longer version of the video. If you want to know more about whether you should go to this attraction and how much the price is, how to get there and whether it's good for English people, check out the shorter video on my channel. See you soon!